Okay. All right, we're back with Kelly McGinnis, who, of course, is at the C-suite at one of those Fortune 100 companies. And we're talking about how we can help Gen Z, especially when it comes to the workforce, entrepreneurship. And Kelly is here to help out. First, Kelly, do you understand the terminology amongst that Gen Z audience? Like when they start to use their words, do you go, I got it, I get it?
Absolutely not yet.
Is this a challenge? Is this where do they need to change the way they speak, or are the other generations needing to understand what they're saying?
I think it's a little bit of both. I think it's a little bit of both. But I do think, generally speaking, in the workplace, I think it needs to be toned down a little bit. However, I think in personal interactions and things, I think we all need to get a little bit better.
Really? So you're saying it's kind of everyone's responsibility to know what the heck we're saying?
Absolutely. I'm
Okay,
sure we all have terms in our own generations, I'm sure. And it just is what it is at this point.
I'll go with that. Now,
Yeah.
I've been raised, and maybe you have too, is the 9 to 5. You go to work, you come home, you turn off. But of course, now with the digital society, Zoom, I've noticed that it's not about 9 to 5 anymore. Is it project based? Get it done. I don't care when it's done. Is that kind of where the Gen Z is? And do the other generations accept that?
Yeah, so I absolutely think the 9 to 5 is dead. I think it's been in a slow decline for a while. And I see a lot of people decide, I'm going to come into the office around 10 and I'm going to get all my stuff done. And I might go home and go to the gym or something and come back on and do it. It's about how efficient and good you are at your job, and the hours are more defined. Now, that one exception to that, I would say, is the whole office culture is still more in this 9 to 5. So if you've got a meeting with an important person, you show up in person every single time, and then you build your infrastructure around it to make it happen.
Well, keep that 9 to 5, but how about the 4 day work week, which we see is being pitched constantly? What's your thought on that?
I'm also okay with that. But again, a lot of these jobs depend on who needs something from me and when, and it's more about customers externally than it is internally. So, for example, if I have a customer meeting or one of my team members has to be in front of a customer and it happens to be a Friday, that is a working day for most of the world. And so, from that perspective, you make it work with the confines of what it requires to do your job.
Now, do you want to help Gen Z integrate into a Gen X millennial workforce, or do you want the workforce of the millennial Gen X integrate with Gen Z?
Mostly the latter. I mostly want to change the workforce culture, the workplace culture a little bit to evolve to where this is going into the future. But I do think there are a few core tenets that Gen Z actually has to do to be successful in any workplace at any time.
So let's talk about this whole meeting thing because I was raised, maybe you were, 1 hour meeting, that's standard. And now we see things called stand-ups. Let's do this really fast. Let's not even get together. Let's do it over Zoom. What do you feel is the right meeting for all generations to get along?
Yeah, so I think it totally depends on the context. And most times you don't actually need a meeting. You need more of a quick stand up and inform what are we doing. If you, I have a few constructs of what requires a meeting. A meeting requires you need everybody to action something that comes out of it or get on the same page, and it takes a little bit longer. That is what meetings are for. Otherwise, I think it is much better served as an email, a quick stand up, a newsletter, something like that. If the information flow is required to be multidimensional and two-way.
So we know what a KPI is, key performance indicator. When you look at KPIs, do you use different tools to assess? Like, is there a dashboard that you suggest using? Do you use Slack to make sure communications is happening? What do you suggest someone doing?
Yeah, so I always my team is very large. So I do multi-channels. I always do newsletters for which most people end up reading. If I need to have a multi-way communication, I do monthly town halls with the entire team where anyone can ask anything. And I think generally speaking, that will do. But we also use video too. So I'll use video to interact with everybody as well.
It's interesting. You said newsletter. Is that a memo? Is it the same thing?
Kind of like a memo, but more personal. And then when I say personal, I don't mean like everything that's going on in my life, but just less formal. So the formality is probably a little less than what you'd see in a memo.
So when you hire a Gen Z, they of course use social media not just as a doom scroll type environment. They use it as communication. They use it as news. What's your thought about social media in the workplace?
I love it. I love it. Yeah, I think the only thing that we need to be a little careful of is when you engage on social media and you are in a company, what you say online actually starts to be part of the company mentality. And you just have to be careful a little bit about the line. But I'm pretty lenient on that. And I think it is just a way of life, and it actually should be in that positive.
The younger generation, back to Gen Z, does have an activist type of role. What's
Yeah.
your thought about social media and expressing your views when you're working in a corporate environment? Are you okay with that, or do you want to make sure that there's a separate channel for that?
As long as it's respectful, for which we all know not everything that shows up on social media is respectful, but it's got to be respectful and it cannot alienate somebody else. And so if it follows those two criteria, I'm totally fine with it because what happens is you got a bunch of Gen Z, you got a bunch of people with lots of different opinions, and if you alienate someone in a corporate culture, it never turns out well in life or in corporate. And so I'm careful about that.
And like I said, Fortune 100 company, you're in the C-suite. We see this advent of AI really have, it's almost on the express train. Where does Gen Z need to pay attention to this? Does it have a chance of taking their jobs, or is this an integration with their jobs?
Yeah, it'll absolutely be an integration. But what I want to see more of from a Gen Z perspective is the AI advent and them using AI, they're natives at this point. But what they can't forget is you got to still be able to be in person. You've got to have those human behaviors and the way that people are interact with each other that millennials and Gen X's had. That millennials, if they're not intentional about it, will lose out on that skill set. And I really don't think that skill set is going anywhere.
All right. You're talking Gen Z. Last question. Do you have a cheat code for them? Something to, I don't want to use the word manipulate, but a way for a Gen Z to talk to somebody in another generation to kind of woo them to their side. Is there a cheat code you might have for them?
Don't know if it's a cheat code, but I always ask lots of questions first. I think as leaders, we tend to tell before we listen, and I try to take it the other way to make them feel like they actually belong and that I want us to evolve more towards them while I try to pull them around to the other side of there are still some foundational things that Gen Z needs to do.
C-suite. Kelly, thanks a lot for hanging out.
Absolutely.